Business Buying Banter meets no BS reality. Get ready to dive into the world of buying and selling businesses without the fluff and fancy jargon. Business Buying Banter meets no BS reality. Get ready to dive into the world of buying and selling businesses without the fluff and fancy jargon. Whether you're a seasoned business buying pro or a curious aspiring entrepreneur, this is where the real talk happens. Because in business, there's no room for sugarcoating. Let's get down to the brass tacks.
Hello?
Hello.
I can't see you, Deb.
I can't see you either, Richard.
I hear you just fine.
Can anybody in the audience hear us? Rocky, give us a message if you can hear us. Sia must have sunk.
Yeah. See us sunk. Okay, well, now we have the ultimate technical issue. So I don't know if anybody can even hear us.
Well, we wanted to shorten the show a little bit, and we're really going to shorten now.
It might be over by 2:03. We can hear you. Okay, LinkedIn user. Okay, so the good news, who posted that, thank you. Well, you don't see us, Jamia, so that's good. You don't have to look at us. Okay, so Deb, I don't get to look at your pretty face, but we can go through our questions, and when Sia comes back from her bathroom break or wherever she is, she'll maybe get our picture. Oh, there you are. Hello.
Hello. We're in the house. I was ready to roll like a podcast, baby.
Okay.
Hey, voice of God speaking. I got booted out by the platform. Sorry, everyone.
Oh, that's all right. This is the joy.
This is beautiful. Yeah, technology is fantastic when it works. What's going on, Deb?
Oh my gosh. Oh, it's been a busy week. A lot of activity with a lot of buyers. Just looking at businesses that are selling at too high of multiples, and they're very unique where you need a license in the ownership per the state requirements, and the buyers that are looking at them, they don't know that either you got to have that license. You know the story, Richard, or
of course,
or do a stock purchase, keep the current owner on to carry the license, or hire a seasoned employee. So a lot of that is going on these days. It's
well, you're getting more people looking into home services. It's become a hot category, and buyers have to understand. You can do it potentially as a stock sale, but in some states, license is held by individuals. Some parts of license are held by corporations, and even some places you can, and some places you can't trade off other people's license. And what I always tell buyers is, even if you can, and even if you can get it done, the goal has to be for you, the buyer, to get the license. Because if not, you're always beholden. And if you run the business for a certain period, yes, you may be able to get people to trade off their license for a certain period of time. But if down the road, 3, 4, 5 years, if you want to sell the business, you got to go through the whole thing again. So the agenda has to be, that is a temporary solution.
You would have been a damn great SBA underwriter. I'm telling you. It's the message.
To all the other wonderful things. Yeah, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't do it.
But that's true. I remember underwriters back in my day working for banks directly. That owner, even though if you pull in the seller as part owner with the required license, what's your plan, buyer, to get the license? And sometimes, they want it in writing. They want to see it. They want to know it. And that's all good. It's not called a pain in the dupa. It's all good.
No, it's all good. It's the right way to go about doing it, because you wanted to one of the biggest reasons going into your own business is to control your own destiny.
Yeah.
So if you buy a business and you have to trade off someone else's license, and they get hit by the dupa truck, or whatever the case may be, and especially an employee, the employee, the potential always exists for them to hold you hostage. So you got to go in there with the idea that You got to ultimately obtain the license. And I see other ones. Not long ago, there was one where the buyer hadn't even thought that you need a license. It was a tree trimming business, and you need an arborist license.
Isn't that something? And then not only can there be state specific, I can recall localities.
Oh, absolutely.
Municipalities, they have their own restrictions and such. So a lot to look into. And I'm glad we brought it up because it seems to be a common trend today. Buyers that are going to obtain bank financing backed by the SBA, when you're looking to use those funds, don't think you can just be an investor buying the business and not have any of the experience, because you hear all about passive income and absentee owned. That doesn't work with SBA financing.
No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And they get involved in some of these deals and go too far down the road, and it's like, oops. Like, oh, I didn't know that. Well, you're supposed to do this the other way around. Let's first get informed.
Yeah, and here's the other quandrum is many of the listing brokers don't know that. So they keep moving that train down the road and spending all this time thinking we got a deal. Let's look at the financials, which we want to look at the financials to make sure the cash is right. But if you don't have the license, don't even look at the financials. We got to figure out what we're going to do before we even get there.
Absolutely. And I had a question, actually, I was going to ask you later on the show, but since we're talking about SBA, what is the amount that SBA will finance, what dollar amount for real estate, number one? And the second thing is, if the real estate represents more than 51% of the total package, will they still do those blended notes over 25 years?
Yeah. So number one, your first question, how much will the SBA finance real estate? That depends upon if we can go max, Richard, with a pari passu. If we're working with a lender that will do the 5 million max on the real estate, whether it's a 7A or a 504, and if we still need more money to finance, that same lender will go conventional, and it's called a pari passu loan.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as far as I always explain to buyers, when you are purchasing a business that includes the owner-occupied real estate, and owner-occupied per the SBA is defined as 51% of the square footage is the owner-operator, the business that's operating, for it to qualify for the SBA. And then we got two buckets to finance in the overall amount financed, the non-real estate bucket and the real estate bucket. The non-real estate bucket is your business sale price, your working capital, and all of your third-party fees, the SBA guarantee fee and all the third-party fees, less the 10% down payment. That's your non-real estate bucket. Real estate bucket, that's the price of the real estate and or the valuations for both, whichever is less. And so now we have two buckets. If the real estate bucket is weighted 51% or greater, so it's a little heavier than the non-real estate bucket, we're going to do a 25-year fully blended term.
Great.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if it's real close to like 50-50, you might have a 12-year term, 13-year term.
Okay, so they could modify it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if it's 51 or greater and meets the other criteria of the square footage, etc., you can blend the two and get a 25-year amortization. And I like the way you do that. You look like Mike Tyson.
Oh man. All right. Well, let's get to our topic today. Mistakes. And listen, we all make them. I still make mistakes, and that's how I learn. We talked a couple of weeks ago about mistakes that buyers make. We're going to talk today about mistakes that sellers make. We should probably have a show about mistakes that lenders make, and I'll share a few of my mistakes.
Absolutely.
But I love them because that's how we get good at what we do, to make sure all of you that are listening and or watching don't make the same mistakes. Or if a seller made mistakes, you need to know what that is, buyers, to pay attention to it, right? So
absolutely. And Sia, by the way, topics today is mistakes sellers make before the LOI. Last week we covered, or 2 weeks ago, mistake buyers make. So today we're going to cover the seller side of things. We
could say mistakes Sia made.
Yeah, but that's 2 today, Sia. Straight 3, you're out. Okay.
Oh man, we love her. We love her.
We love her.
Well,
So
you deal with sellers much more because you've sold many businesses over your career. So I'm going to let you take the lead with these top 3 and we'll collaborate on it. So let's go to Richard.
Okay. And I have my glasses on because I made some notes, but I also find when I put my glasses on, I actually hear you better. Okay. So there's, a couple things. The overarching theme to these LOI is understand that these can be very comprehensive documents. It's, the old school thought is, oh, it's non-binding, I'll sell an LOI. Well, parts of an LOI can very much be binding, and oftentimes they're comprehensive enough so that in larger deals, the actual definitive purchase agreement comes way down the road and is signed oftentimes simultaneously at closing. So all the big pieces are in the LOI. So the first mistake that sellers make is thinking, not always, but often, thinking that the LOI is just this watered down version of an agreement. It's not. Very often that's not the case. That could be the agreement that takes you right through to the time when you sign the final agreement. That's after the due diligence is already done. So the first thing, overarching theme to all of this, if you got to take this seriously. So that's the overarching theme. A couple of points that start off is, point number 1 would be make sure you want to do the deal. So when you go into an LOI, and that it's almost like a double click to the first point we just discussed, is this LOI is going to send you into due diligence, and it's going to sit.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to ask you a question.
Ask 2, same price.
I will. So tell me this, because sometimes over the years of my career, I can hear people, professionals and sellers, and just put it on a piece of paper and just make an agreement. Are there sellers who are tire kickers as well, like the buyers that just want to see what somebody
all day long?
Okay, all right. So
and you see it. Here's the perfect example. Seller hires a broker. I won't talk about sellers who bring their business to market on their own, because they're usually insane. They're not even thinking about hire professional. That's a whole other show. But so they hire a broker. And they come up with, well, yeah, of course, I'll be willing to sell it if I get X, Y, and Z price. And the seller, in their zeal to get a listing, with the old philosophy of, well, if it doesn't sell 30, 60 days, 90 days, we'll lower the price. And that, often is not what happens. The sellers go into this and they're tire kickers, say, yeah, I'll put it on the market. And if I get my price, I'll sell it. Because the reality is every business is for sale. Some owners just don't know it yet. I mean, if someone walks in with the right price and terms, generally people will sell. And so you do get absolutely sellers that are tire kickers, and they won't complete a deal unless they get a certain price, no matter what the market tells them, because the market always dictates. So yes, absolutely, categorically, there are sellers who are tire kickers as well. So
what do you mentor business buyers to do to sniff that out? Is there any way to sniff that out?
Yeah, put in an offer.
Okay.
That's the best way. That's the best way to take a seller's temperature.
Okay.
Orally or rectally, by the way. That's the best way to take their temperature. You find out if they're for real, what kind of counter offer they make.
Yeah.
What's more important to them? Is it the down payment? Is it the note? Is it other terms and condition? Is it whether or not they're going to stay on or not stay on? It's the way to take the seller's temperature, regardless of what you're trying to ascertain.
Okay. All right.
So make offers. It's critically important, and very often, I had this. We talked about it yesterday in yesterday's webinar, and I've talked about it before. Buyers have to get used to making offers. LOIs are wonderful. I can't stand these EOIs, these expressions of interest or indications of interest. It's just another pile of crap on the pile of nonsense, which is, they send us an indication of interest, give us some parameters related to the valuation, and then we're going to go into the LOI stage. It's like just make work project for accountants and attorneys. It's ridiculous.
When did that come into play?
Oh yeah, that's been around for it really started when the brokers started taking their businesses to auction, trying to create an auction for the business with a deadline of when an indication of interest had to be submitted, because they would try to get multiple bids. That's declined dramatically
Got it.
in the last year or so. But so that became, well, people would say, well, I'm not going to go spend a whole lot of money on crafting a robust LOI if there's 8 other people bidding on the business, and so the advent of an IOI, an indication of interest, or an EOI, an expression of interest, um, that evolved from that, which is, I mean, in my opinion, is complete garbage, because you could, then it's just it's another document. It just muddies the water. I understand in certain cases what people do, but provide, like, one of the crazy things, give us an indication of interest is supposed to provide parameters of evaluation. Well, if I'm a seller, I don't want to know that you're willing to pay me between $7 and $9 million. Well, because that means nothing. Is it 7 or is it 9? And so the indication of interest, when I represent sellers, I never work on an indication of interest. If a buyer says to me, we want to put forth an indication of interest, okay, whatever turns your crank. I mean, it doesn't really mean much to us. But it's in a lot of cases, it's a useless tool, and I'll have the debate all day long with anyone who tells me otherwise, because I just think it's you just muddy the waters, and you don't get to the point of things.
So our last show, we talked about buyers' mistakes before LOI, and in the conversation that we had, we said buyers need to have that exclusivity where no one else can make an offer on this business while I'm doing my due diligence. Do sellers purposely try not to include that in case a cash buyer comes to town?
Absolutely. It's a great question, because it's one of the 3. Every seller thinks that they could try to exclude that. And I say but and a lot don't even realize that is a clause till they see it. But the way they need to understand it, I look at it this way. If you get an LOI from a serious buyer who has the financing in place, is the right person to operate the business, I advise my sellers, no problem. It's fine to get into an exclusive period, because if the price and terms are what you want, and we deem this individual to be competent and financeable and is going to be able to get the deal to the finish line, what do we want to screw around with a bunch of other buyers for? This is the one, and this is a good one, and let's work and direct all of our energy towards getting a deal done with this individual. On the other hand, if it's iffy and not sure if this is the right individual, or there's a lot of concerns, it goes back to the first point, which is make sure you want to do the deal with this individual before you go and get into an LOI with them. And a buyer has a right to include an exclusivity or no shop clause. They're going to be devoting, and the seller's going to be spending a lot of time as well. But the buyer's going to be spending a lot of time, effort, and money on accountants, attorneys, other advisors. They have a right, as long as the period is reasonable, 30, 45, 60 days, whatever, to have exclusivity on the deal. It's just fair. I mean, and reasonable.
When business brokers are representing listings and they're working with the seller and the buyer simultaneously, they'll whip out their template. Oh, just use this. This will work. Do the brokers ensure that exclusivity is in their template of an LOI?
Some do. I actually saw one this week. I saw an LOI from the broker's office, and I'm never opposed to using them as long as it's a good template and the buyer can add their own contingencies, because it does save money for the buyer with an attorney. And there's only so many things that could be in an LOI. And so if it's a reasonable LOI, chances are the broker's one is pretty good. Sometimes there's garbage in there that doesn't make any sense. I saw one this week from a broker that was very favorable. I mean, I shouldn't say so much favorable as much as it was reasonable. And they did include an exclusivity period. And this broker did go on to have, there's the deal contingencies and a whole bunch of blank lines for the buyer to drop in what their contingencies were unique to that business. So I thought that particular one was very fair. It was actually a buyer client of mine who purchased our course and asked me a question and sent me this blank LOI and sort of had wasn't sure to use. I said, no, I'm actually fine with it. I thought it was a terrific template, just has to be massaged a little bit for the peculiarities and particulars of that deal.
Great. That's good to know. And I'm glad to hear that. And the buyer can take that template and have their attorney add those line items, right, on their
Yes.
side. So
Yes.
and your course also includes an attorney reviewed and a Richard Parker reviewed LOI template, right?
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Super. Yeah, I agree. There are good ones out there, but not all of them are good. And you just
Not all right.
gotta know where you're going, people.
Yeah, you got to know where you're going, and that's why, one of the things buyers should have to do is they should familiarize themselves with, of course, understanding financial statements, because you don't want to send the financials. You probably could look at 40, 50 businesses before you buy one. And so you're not going to send the financials to your accountant every time to review, because you'll spend more on your accounting fees than you will on your down payment possibly. So you want to know you have to learn how to read financial statements. And you should also gain familiarity with LOIs, letters of intent, asset purchase agreement or definitive purchase agreements, and NDAs. So the first one or two you could send to your attorney. If anything comes up that's different, any one of those documents, afterwards you can have it reviewed. But the goal is you want to be able to review them on your own, and only in a case, hey, I've never seen this before, this is pretty odd, you may want to run that by your attorney. But if you have to run to your attorney every time you have to sign an NDA, I mean there's certain things that are standard to them. 80% is standard to all NDAs. I mean, you got to learn what those clauses are, read through them, understand them, and then be able to execute them on your own. Maybe not for the first couple of them. Similarly, with an LOI, you have to know what it looks like and what it means, and get the answers to that. You don't just fly by the seat of your pants.
Do you talk about the NDA disclosure in your course as well?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Super. Listen, I'm telling you, people will say to me, I'm still learning how to do this. Well, yeah, you should be. And that's a good thing, but make sure where you're learning is the right resource, ladies.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's exactly, I had someone at a LinkedIn exchange last week with someone who was talking. It was different ways of doing it. And I think we also talked about it on LinkedIn, which is, you want to get advice from people that are at where you want to be.
Yeah, I like that.
It's and we discussed it yesterday's webinar. I've had before. You have all these forums of business buyers that no track record, no success, often no money, no knowledge about buying a business, nothing. And they're all on these forums together with other individuals who are trying to buy a business, have no track record, no money, no experience. And they're all asking and answering each other's questions. So like, if you have a problem, you don't need to speak to people who have the same problem. You need to speak to people who have solved the problem, right? And I was thinking of an analogy, like, I was at the dentist this morning. I was laughing on the way there because I was thinking about yesterday's webinar and said, if you have a toothache, you don't just ask other people who have teeth, what you're supposed to do. You go to the dentist, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's, hopefully people learn. I mean, the ones that don't learn or are not willing to learn or not invest the time or the money to get educated, they're just the ones that, they fall out of the process. They're the ones who, in our case today, sign terrible LOIs and never get to the finish line.
Learning is good, and
learning is good,
and that's all these episodes are about mistakes, and that's how we learn. So,
yes.
So bring us another one, Richard. What's another mistake that sellers make before LOI, letter of intent?
Okay, well, one of them that they do mistake when it's not so much before, but it's at the time, which is. And again, we're talking about LOIs that are more comprehensive. And I had this situation not long ago. The seller can be in the LOI. The seller can actually be responsible for the buyer's deal fees if they back out of the LOI. So again, the understanding is when you go into an LOI, it's with the understanding of the goal is to get this to the finish line. Buyers should never look at it like, well, I'll sign them up and then we could have this huge renegotiation. Sometimes you have to do that just because if you're pressed for time, you can't get information. But it's sometimes, I had one recently in an LOI where if the seller backed out, they're responsible for the buyer's deal. It was a big deal. Wow. The buyer's deal fees were going to be between $500,000 and $750,000. Okay, it was a massive deal, and so we went back, and I was representing the seller in this case, and everybody was on board. We wanted to do the deal, and the case was, well, if you make material adjustments to the agreement or to the valuation, we should have the right to back out without any penalty. Like if you're willing to pay, give you an example, you're willing to pay $100 million for this business, and then you come back after some due diligence and now we're going to retrade. It's called retrading. and our price has been adjusted to 90 million. Well, we have the right at that point to say yay or nay if we want to go through with the deal.
Mm-hmm.
So our position was, if you adjust the valuation by more than a certain percentage, we could back out, and the buyer wouldn't agree. And you were saying, like, telling my client, you can't, at the very least, to get to first base, they're going to spend 100 grand in legal. They got big attorneys and accountants, so they're going to spend 100 grand before you have a chance to spin around in the room. So if we can't get that clause, and furthermore, if they're going into the idea, if they're going to the LOI with the philosophy of, well, we could always change the deal, I'm not so sure those are the type of people we want to deal with.
Wow. Right on.
And so we ended up not moving forward with it, but a seller has to realize, if there is this clause where they may be responsible for fees, that's fine, as long as the buyers don't change the deal by more than 3%, 5%, something along those lines, because the buyer has to be locked in as well, and the seller can't just change their mind because they woke up on the wrong side of the bed that morning.
Yeah. Wow. Changing the terms, which terms can be changed, not in the $100 million range. I'm going back down to small business or lower middle market. This is happening a lot. So maybe provide some feedback. At LOI, this high multiple is agreed upon based on the cash flow. The price is sky high. We just make the offer so we can get the ball rolling, right? I like to share with the buyer, just be prepared, because when that third party business valuation comes in for SBA back financing, if it's lower than what that high agreed upon LOI is, the seller has to concede because the bank isn't going to finance more money. Do you suggest that that's discussed and or disclosed in the LOI?
The way I like to, yes, but the way I like to disclose it in the LOI is that the deal is subject to SBA financing to the complete satisfaction of the buyer.
Okay.
So that, in fact, will cover it, because the buyer says, okay, well, I got this SBA loan. We thought the business is going to sell for $2 million. We agreed on that. And the assumption was that the SBA was going to lend $1.6 million. I was going to put up $200,000, and you, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, is going to lend, finance $200,000. That's how we got to the $2 million. And now the SBA came back and said, well, their valuation is $1.4 million. Okay. And you, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, still want the $2 million. I don't have the difference. So either you got to finance it all. So that's why, if you have a financing contingency in there, subject to the buyer's full satisfaction of the terms and condition of the financing, that allows them to extract themselves from the deal if the deal is not funded to the level that the buyer and seller agree to.
I loved your first sentence and how you stated how you want that verbiage written in the LOI. It was almost gentle enough not to piss off the seller. Like, you think my business is worth $2 million less than what you think it's going to come back at that? The way you said it was almost a gentle way, where let's just keep the ball rolling.
Yes. Okay. It's out of our hands.
Say
right?
It again. What was that?
If the financing is subject to the buyer's full approval, based upon the buyer's full approval of the finance, the finance to the complete satisfaction. Either of those terms, financing must be offered on terms that are fully acceptable to the buyer, or the funding is subject to the buyer's full approval. Either or, because then the reality is it's you remove it from both the buyer and both the seller's hands and say, hey, look, our hands are tied. Hey, Mr. Mrs. Seller,
yes,
if this lender won't lend us the right amount, if you want to find another lender for me, that's okay. I'm still prepared to pay that price, but I don't have that. I don't have the differential to put up. So that extracts them both from the equation and puts the onus on the underwriter.
Yes. And it doesn't start a bad relationship between seller and buyer out of the gates.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Perfect. That was good. Thank you. I like that. That was my golden nugget takeaway from richardparker.com.
.com. Deb, you're the best. You're the best. Oh my God, you make me laugh. DebCurtis.com. And I appreciate the note on the real estate that you talked about earlier. I'm actually going to email that individual who asked me that question. And as I always do, and when a question comes up with SBA, say, if you want to know anything about SBA, Call Deb Curtis.
.com.
Cam. Okay.
Did we get 3? Did we hit our 3 within 30 minutes? Did we hit our 3 points?
Yeah, we talked about the that they make sure they want to do the deal, the how detailed they can be, and understand being responsible for deal fees and an exclusivity or no shot clause.
Boom.
Boom, baby, boom.
All right. So before we get out of here, when's your next webinar? Tell our listeners what's going on.
June the 12th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We did one last night and we covered due diligence, the approach to due diligence, preparation and organization. And there's 11 categories that have to be investigated during due diligence: financials, assets, competition, the sales, the marketing, the industry, suppliers, customers, etc. 11 in total. We covered 211 assets and systems. We'll cover 2 to 3 more next time. That video will be posted. We'll see us in the background as fast as she moves her butt to get the editing done and onto the YouTube channel. We'll have that, so we make that available. And June 12th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Love it. Love it.
And they can register. Go to richardparker.com. Probably tomorrow, the new link will be up.
Fantastic.
To register.
And your YouTube channel handle is?
Richard Parker Diomo, D-I-O-M-O, like the abbreviation for doing it on my own.
I love that. And all those Q&A sessions, the episode specific, topic specific, you could just sit back for a couple of hours, ladies and gentlemen, and just hear and learn over and over and over and over. And you know what? We'll just keep bringing more Q&A and more business buying banter and more free webinars and more Q&A from Richard Parker.
And you. We got all our business buying banter stuff on there as well in the playlist. So, I mean, you could get lost. The nice thing is you can get lost in meaningful information, right? There's a lot of good education. So this is, it's always helpful. And I know everybody appreciates your insight, Deb, to this whole process and being able to educate people. So it's wonderful. We're going to try to, as I say in Boston, we're going to try to make them smarter.
That's right. All right, Ben. We keep learning together. That's how we rise above, ladies and gentlemen.
Amen to that.
We'll be back in 2 weeks for another Business Buying Banter show, but you can catch Richard as well in between with his webinars, and follow us on LinkedIn, our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, share. All of your support really helps us spread the message, because it's about retaining and growing small businesses through entrepreneurship by acquisition. That's what it's all about.
Beautiful. Thanks, Deb. Out of here. Ciao, Bella. Go with God.
Yes. Oh.